I wanted to talk today about getting started with CEREC Anterior restorations. I'm Todd with DigitalEnamel.com, where we are elevating digital dentistry, and doing restorations in the anterior isn't that much harder than doing it in the posterior, but there's a lot of roadblocks that we put on ourselves on completing them. And so what I want you to at least realize, for those practicing dentists out there, you are the experts when it comes to tooth morphology. You know what it is. You are shaping and contouring constantly. You already been educated in all the different anatomical variations of teeth. You are the expert. So try one. Start doing it. If you are forgetting what a canine looks like, pull out your old waxing book and look at it as a reference. There's no disgrace in that at all, because, quite frankly, stress kills creativity. That is one of the hallmarks in one of our veneer classes, where we say, you can't have stress and be creative at the same time. So if we do things to lower our stress, we can then be creative. So let's be creative in our first anterior CEREC restorations. The first thing I'd say to do is go into the case willing or knowing that you may have to remake it. Not that you will, in fact, I doubt you will remake it, but if you go into it, you don't have to tell the patient you're going to remake it, don't start that way. But if you feel like, hey, this isn't exactly the way I wanted, or it's not to the level of what our practice delivers, be willing to remake it. That means you remake it yourself, or maybe you send it to your lab and you give it another shot. But when you have that mentality going into it, you're going to reduce your stress, your creative level is going to go up, and you're going to be a lot more relaxed going in through the restoration. The other thing is don't do a full mouth of restorations your first time. That's crazy. The more you do, the more stress you're going to have during the appointment. So keep it simple. 1, 2, 2 or max, I would have to say, for the first few restorations that you're doing, because you want them to look good. You have to keep your creative juices flowing as you're making these. And so keep it to a smaller number. As far as CEREC goes, I really recommend the BioCopy method, especially for anterior restorations. The reason for that is you get hung up in the software. Software is great. It can do a lot of things for you, but when you're searching for tools, you're trying to think of how you watch this online and how this guy rotated something or made something thicker and was talking about margins profile. Your head starts to spin and you start to forget general dentistry. And in another video, I want to talk about the common mistakes in multiple units in anteriors with CEREC, and it's based off of that. We get hung up in the software too much. So I'd like for you to at least consider BioCopy. BioCopy is just copying something and then having CEREC duplicate it. Well, let's say you're doing a lateral for the first time. Go ahead and take an alginate impression, pour it up, and then wax that tooth up the way you want, or use old composite or something, do that. And then all you have to do is let CEREC see it, and then you use that as your BioCopy. That will take out tons of stress, because all of the creativity, all of the designing and everything was done already, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel at the time of the appointment. Another way to do that is if, let's say, a kid breaks a tooth on the monkey bars, chips the tooth halfway, you can build it up in composite, make sure it's the right contours, occlusion, embrasures, and everything are looking right, and then show CEREC it, and then just tell CEREC to remake that using the BioCopy method. And so I highly recommend that for your first set of restorations. Now, as far as prep styles go, if you're already putting burr to tooth, you better take away enough so you don't compromise the aesthetics of it. I am as I call myself aggressively conservative, which means I'll do anything to save tooth structure. By any means, I'll try something to save tooth structure, and it's really the reason why I got into CEREC. But in the anterior, you have to kind of release that mentality. I know we've been trained on prepless veneers and minimally prepared veneers, but those aren't the easiest ones to do. If you're going to do something easy, you have to prep those teeth so that, one, you have adequate facial reduction, because you don't want CEREC to blow holes in it, and if you don't know enough about spacer setting and angulation of your preps, you have to overcome that by prepping just a little bit more. I would say in the early times of doing your first restorations, don't do anything less than 0.5. Can CEREC do less than that? Of course it can, but you want to make it easier on yourself. As far as the margins go, make sure that it has a margin to mill to. It's got to have some sort of lip so that it can machine to it predictably and in a way that you're going to feel good about the restoration. So I know you can see big, heavy shoulders online, and you don't have to do all that, but I would say in the anterior, 0.5 to 0.4 of axial reduction will be okay. Now, I know there's some people on watching this going, oh my goodness, 0.5 reduction, facial reduction. I mean, give me a break. We're trying to make these look right. We're not killing teeth. I mean, heck, the axial depth of a DO amalgam is 1.5 millimeters. I mean, that's 3 times more than what I just suggested. So 0.5 is not a lot in the anterior. The other thing about preparations, make sure things are rounded. Especially in the United States, we've all been trained of mechanical resistance retention form, and that's good. That's really good. And so a lot of practicing American dentists will prep very angular, very horizontal with sharp transitions because we're so in tune with mechanical resistance retention form. Well, that's good, but the problem with that in the milling world is that one of our burrs, which is the step burr, wants to mill out those transitions, and you'll get what's called over milling. Well, if that fills in with resin, your ceramic will be a little bit thinner. It's almost like having little micro voids in it, and you can start to see the resin through it. So when you evaluate your preps from facial to incisal edge or anywhere else around there, make sure it's round, 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 round. You can't make it too round, so make it round. As far as materials go, I'd highly suggest you sticking with just a couple options. I would suggest Empress CAD from Ivoclar Vivadent or Vita Mark II from Vita. They both have different variations. Both of them have a monochromatic block and both have a polychromatic block. So if you wanted polychromatic, which I imagine you would, to get some more translucency at the incisal edge, the MultiBlock from Ivoclar Vivadent is fantastic, and the Vita Triluxe Forte block I think is equally fantastic. I like them both the same. The difference between both of them, which I will cover in another video shortly, is that the Empress CAD block, in my eyes, has a lot more fluorescence in the translucent zone. The Vita Triluxe Forte block has a lot of translucency at the incisal edge, a lot. And so when you're looking at the patient, if you can just barely see kind of a gradation of translucency, you'll want to use the MultiBlock. If you see a very defined gray area at that incisal edge, you definitely want to lean towards the Vita Triluxe Forte block. And the advantage of using those ceramics are you're not painting onto a blue crown for Emax, and they also machine really well. They've been in dentistry for years and years and years, and the colors are really nice. You have a wide range of those. So start off with the Ivoclar Vivadent MultiBlock or a Vita Triluxe Forte block. You can also reduce your stress during the appointment by doing something analog, and that's taking an alginate impression. I do this every single time for multiple units, and you can do this for a single or a double. So you've prepped the teeth, you've imaged them, and somebody's designing them, probably you are. Have your assistant take an alginate impression and pour that up in a very fast set stone. And what that will do is by the time it's coming out of the milling chamber, you at least have something to try the restoration on. Now the impression doesn't have to be perfect. Even if there was a bubble here and there, it's okay, you can flick it off. The idea is just so that you can try it on and then you can analyze it and look at different angles. Remember, we're trying to reduce the stress, or creative juices can be high, and if you're only doing it on the patient, which is fine, that's not a problem, your stress level is going to be a little bit higher. You may want to work a little bit quicker because you know, the patient is aware of you taking in and out of the mouth, and eventually you're going to take it in and out of the mouth enough times where you think, this is just where it's going to have to be. So pour up a model that sets really fast that you can try it on, and then you can look at different angulations and you can do little tertiary anatomy with it, make little notches and things like that, because you'll feel less stress when you're away from the patient, maybe in your lab. One other little secret that I'd like to give you is don't be afraid to open up the spacer. So the spacer is one of your parameter settings in CEREC, and it's okay to open that up, especially in the anterior. Usually anterior preparations are very tall, that we've got a lot of mechanical resistance and retention for them. And if you're bonding these in, we're not really relying too much on that. But if you open your spacer up, what that allows you to do is it has more resin show through. And so let's say you used a multi-block and you wanted an even more polychromatic look, and right at the margin it's say 0.4, 0.5 axial reduction, but you have, let's say, a 200 micron spacer. That resin will have a glow or a shine through that surface and give you more of a polychromatic look. I personally use VeriLink Aesthetic from Ivoclar Vivadent. It's based on value, dark to light. The try-in paste are spectacular. They're exactly the way the resins are, and you have the option of dual cure or light cured. And so don't be afraid to open up the spacer. Something else you can do is go into the restoration knowing you're going to make a provisional. That is okay. But what I'd like for you to at least do is mill the provisional. We have lots of different materials that you can mill from, that you can use temp bond and stick it in there for a while you make the final restoration. A lot of our composite resin blocks are excellent to do this. Now I realize you're spending a little bit of extra money to make that provisional rather than making it traditionally with acrylic, but when you do that, you already have your digital file. You already have your margins set. You already have the contours. And when you're later at when you're at lunch or whenever you're redesigning it, you can make some different tweaks. You can make something more cornered, rounded, thicker, whatever you need, and you're not under the pressure of the appointment to be completed. In fact, in this case, we had to match a single central, and I'll just have to say that this patient was extremely demanding. He came to us literally only to replace this crown, and the stress level was very high in that because we needed to nail it. And so I went into the appointment or into the procedure knowing that I was going to provisionalize it. We got the PFM off. I provisionalized it with a Lava Ultimate block. I think it was an A1. And so when I did that, it gave us time to do two things. One, he did want to bleach his teeth, so he could bleach his teeth along the way. But I had the Lava Ultimate A1 block, the color set, so that was our reference color. So as he bleached his teeth, we could use shade tabs to see where he was exactly. And then this is the best part about doing it digitally. I didn't have to scan him again. All I had to do was go back into his original file, change the material to something that I liked. In fact, in this case, we did a polychromatic block, a Vita Triluxe Forte block, where we added some staining to it and highlighted some line angles in the incisal edge. But all of the stress was already out. So when he came in, all I had to do was take off the provisional, slide in the permanent one. They were from the exact same file, but we had the opportunity to make the restoration literally over time. The guy was totally delighted, and he became one of our full-time patients and one of our raving fans. So even single centrals aren't very difficult to do if you plan them out right. The last thing I'd like to say about being successful in your first restorations, Have a good stain and glaze technique. Now, I imagine that maybe you don't have as much experience with staining and glazing because you're not doing any anteriors or you've done very few. But what I'd like for you at least to do is stop looking at the names of the colors. You know what the colors are. All you have to do is look at the colors of the stains and go, this is brown, this is light brown, this is a white, this is yellow orange, and see if those colors also match the adjacent teeth. I've seen many stain and glaze courses. I put on tons of them, and what I always emphasize is trust your eyes. Trust that you know what a color looks like, and then pick that one out of the box. Just as a reference, or just a place to get started, if you're doing Empress or Emacs, what I'd suggest you do is start with the number 2 brown. That's a very generic kind of a light brown for cervical areas. An incisal 1, which is their very dark blue. It's kind of almost slightly under, let's say, a royal blue. You're going to use that very lightly. If you put too much on it, it starts to look like a blue stripe really fast. And so be judicious with that. Less is more when it comes to anteriors, because if you put too much of the brown, you put too much of the blue, instantly it looks wrong. So you want just a little bit of fade of that color. The other thing is look at the Emacs Cerem Fluo, F-L-U-O glaze. It is a glaze, but it has great fluorescence to it. It's like a white glaze, and you can use that to accentuate line angles and incisal edges, and even kind of make even a little bit of white craze lines up the facial surfaces. So these are just some tips to get you started in doing CEREC anteriors. I'd love to see you come down to Austin and come to one of our classes. I promise a good time and a lot of techniques to take the stress out so you can be creative.